My name is Amanda Napper. I'm the chair of the Niagara Peninsula branch of Ontario Ancestors. We're glad to have you with us tonight. This is our last webinar of 2025. I'm pleased to welcome Jim Doherty from the Niagara Military Museum. If you're a member, thank you for being a member. New members are always welcome. Our membership benefits include exclusive genealogical resources, special educational opportunities and webinars, just like this one, the opportunities for community and networking, local research support with our special research team. We do advocacy for historical preservation in the area, and we also have a monthly newsletter. It's International Volunteer Day. I just want to put a shout out to my volunteer team. Thank you very much to all of you. You are the lifeblood of our organization, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. If anybody out there is interested in becoming a volunteer, the benefits are more numerous than I can even tell you, but we'd love to hear from you. You should have my email if you're in the newsletter, or if you're in the Facebook group. Feel free to message me and I can give you some information about all the benefits and what we can have you help us with. We are currently looking for somebody to help us with the treasurer role, as well as more research volunteers right now. By all means, please get in touch if you think you fall into any of those categories. But we also need people to help with outreach and talking to the community. So if you're good with people, we'd like to have you too. If you're not a member, but you enjoy our webinars, please consider supporting our branch's efforts with a donation. Your generosity helps us to continue offering these genealogical programs, preserve local history, and expand our resources for researchers like you, and every contribution makes a difference. You can go to our website, niagara.ogs.on.ca/donate, and that will bring you to the donation screen. Are you missing family members? Are you looking for a new research path? Have you got brick walls in your tree? Our help desk is open on November 29th at 7 p.m. for Family Research Live. Our research team volunteers will be at the Moses Rittenhouse Library in Vineland from 1:30 to 3:30 that day. I should have put that on the slide. My apologies. Bring your names and dates and locations, and if you have it, although it is optional, your library card, and we'll help you out with questions. 2026 webinars. I'm happy to announce that we've got a good lineup for January, February, and March so far. Nellis Manor, Kate Pyatt on January 16th. Douglas Mitchell is a researcher of Harriet Tubman and also a relation. We'll have him on February 20th. On March 20th, we're going to have David Servos talk about his family. We'll have sign-up links posted in our Facebook group next week. You should be able to start signing up for Zoom presentations then. If you haven't checked out our master index, it is available to anyone on our website. As I said, it's niagara.ogs.on.ca. So if you have Niagara relatives, that's the first place you should look. Sign up for our newsletter if you're not. There will be an email going out after this webinar to give you the opportunity to sign up. But if you want to get ahead of me, please go to niagara.ogs.on.ca, and there's a form at the bottom of the site, similar to the one on the screen, that will allow you to sign up for the newsletter. If you want to contact us, our email is niagara@ogs.on.ca. And again, if you are somebody who's interested in a volunteer opportunity, that would be a good place to start. Just send us an email.
First off, we are the Niagara Military Museum. We are in Niagara Falls, in the former Niagara Falls Armory. Our catchment area for the history is from the frontier, which a lot of people these days call the border, through to about Ancaster. And we look at Greater Niagara, which would include, say, Brantford, Simcoe, all the way through. So that is our catchment area. And we've even included information about military history, including Guelph. Okay, so we do cover what we think is the whole peninsula. We've been here since incorporated in 2006, and we've actually did our opening here in November 2012. And we've added significantly to our original sparse collection. We're overflowing. Like most museums, we have a lot of stuff. We don't put much in storage if we don't have to, because we like it to be out for people to see. Even though we're an amateur group and the museum professionals really don't like that we have so much stuff out. So, topic for tonight is kind of a service we provide to our visitors and people who contact us is searching military records online, primarily World War I and World War II. Those have the most records available online. With a click of a button, I can find an astonishing amount of stuff on people from World War I and World War II. Okay, so our main sources are Library and Archives Canada is the big source. And how I get right, they've modified their website. So I Google CEF database search. CEF stands for the World War I Canadian Expeditionary Force. And that database was put together some years ago, and it started with attestation papers for World War I veterans. Until 2014, all it had was attestation papers. So those are the papers that you swore an oath, you provided all your information, you swore an oath of loyalty to the king or the sovereign, his heirs and successors, and then you were approved, and the local, your commanding officer or magistrate or something would certify to the oath and what you had written was correct. And on the back of it, of a 2-page legal size document, it would be your health, your religion, and other things, your medical, and you'd be signed either fit or unfit and then be accepted into your battalion. Okay. They've expanded that starting in 2014, starting from A and working through to Z in about 2018, of taking all of the records that are behind every attestation paper. There's something like 640,000 records that they pulled out of their envelopes and started scanning in. A typical record for someone who's done a couple of years overseas in England in the trenches is at least 50 pages, sometimes over 100. That includes hospital records, temperature charts, medical reports, boards, medical boards, why you would be getting some disability. They're pretty extensive records. And it even includes one of our volunteers found out that her great grandfather had apparently failed his Wasserman test. He had been associated with some ladies in France of dubious character. So he had to go through the special hospital to get treated for his STD kind of thing. So there's a whole lot there, and that's one of our major ways of finding things. And in fact, personally, I found out where my grandfather was actually born in Ireland. Like most families, my dad might have known where his dad was born. I'm not sure, but it would have been record that was lost to the family. And when we got his military records, I actually found out that, yeah, he was born in Granard, Longford County, Ireland in 1877. It really gave a connection to where he came from. That's Library and Archives Canada. They've got a lot of military records, much more than just World War I and such in there. The next one is if I'm searching for somebody, I've got a name, okay, but I don't have what they call their regimental or service number, which is how I can easily find them on various databases. It's a number you're given when you sign up, okay, and it should follow you all the days of your life, so to speak, especially through the military. It's your unique identifier. If I'm looking for someone, and I say it's a name like, oh, not Smith, but something, oh, okay, I'll use my own name, Doherty. I was looking for Hugh Doherty, okay? If I type them in, there's actually 6 of them come up. Now, 6 is not bad to look through. You can call up each one and see if that's the one you're looking for. But if you get, say, 50 or 60, it's quite a grind just to go through and open up each set of attestation papers, their sign-up papers, to find out the one you're looking for. For example, Red Hill, the boatman on the Niagara River, the famous boatman, I actually have it written down because there's probably about 5,000 hills in the database for World War I, and none of them are named Red. I think his real name was William. I wrote it down because going through hills, you just can't grind through like 5,000 attestation papers to find the one you want. But say with my grandfather, with only 6 Hugh Dohertys in there, you can open them and look at each one. But if it is someone like a hill, I can go to the Commonwealth Graves Commission if they were a fatality during World War I or World War II, etc. And I can type their name in and maybe get 30 or 40 on a common name like Brown or Grant. And I can go through each one and find out what unit they belong to and come up with a regimental number. And once I've got a proper name and a regimental number, it makes it a lot easier for me to search through the Library and Archives Canada database. Okay. And there's often some more information that comes with the Graves Commission. Let me just take a minute and explain what they are. All Commonwealth soldiers that were killed in something like, say, World War I, World War II, the formerly Imperial War Graves Commission was the person that were the group or body that were responsible for the disinterment from a battlefield grave and put into a proper cemetery, even though they didn't know. There's a lot of unknowns. And they would be doing all the record keeping, where you are, what cemetery, establishing the cemeteries, and looking after them. Like we have in our thing here, a chap who was from St. Catharines, who was in the Air Force, and he was killed in Tunisia. There's a Commonwealth Graves in where he is in Tunisia, and they hire the locals to look after all of those cemeteries. The big ones, of course, are from World War I at places like Passchendaele. That's a good way to narrow down how many people have the same last name, and maybe you might know the first name. You can nail down exactly who you're looking for and their service number. They have approximately 1.7 million records in the Commonwealth Graves Commission. And I just Google them at cwgc.org. And I guess I've done it so much that my computer automatically goes to the right site. So it's commonwealthgravescommission.org is the one that has 1.7 million records. And you can find cemeteries, war dead, all kinds of stuff. World War II is a little bit more difficult because there are some veterans who are still alive. World War I, the last World War I vet died in 2010, prior to taking all of the records and putting them online. So there was nobody left alive from World War I when they started putting together the CEF database. But there still are a significant number of World War II vets alive, okay? So the only files that are readily available are the war dead. And I'm sure most of your members have Ancestry.ca. The museum here has a free account that we search only the free databases. But the one you're looking for is 39 to 47. There's another one on there that looks almost the same, but it says 39 to 45, and it's missing quite a few. I think if you're looking for people who passed away or were killed in action in World War II is the 1939 to 1947. Another very useful place to look for battalions and lists of battalions and things and some background on infantry battalions is in Wikipedia. They do list all the Canadian battalions, and there were 260 odd infantry battalions, mounted rifles, cavalry, all types of construction troops. So that's a very good list to look at to get information on what your family member or person you're interested in belong to. Okay, so those are the main sources I go through. Okay, so personnel records of the First World War is that CEF database. Okay, so what you're looking for is all the Canadians 14 to 18, also basically called the World War I or the Great War in its time. You can look at personnel records, service files, of people who were in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Okay, it's also sometimes CEO, Canadian Expeditionary Overseas Force. The non-permanent active militia, very confusing term, non-permanent active militia, but it'd be something like the Lincoln and Welland. Okay, after they joined up, we have the records from the Royal Newfoundland Regiment and the Newfoundland Forestry Corps, who served in World War I. People who were rejected for whatever reason at Valcartier. Some of the people who were rejected were actually considered enemy aliens. Germans, some Ukrainians and that tried to join up, but they were weeded out at Valcartier, and that's where their records would be also there. And people with imperial gratuities, I believe those are pensioners, okay, that would be getting imperial or I guess British, English, UK pensions. One caveat they also have here is that this collection does not include RCN personnel files or naval service sheets. You have to go to this other link, Royal Canadian Navy Service Ledger Sheets, 1910 to 1941. For the most part, in World War I, aside from, I think we had 2 old cruisers and some other maybe coastal defense ships, most of the Canadians would serve in the Royal Navy, okay, as volunteers, Royal Canadian Reserve Volunteer, I believe it is, into the Royal Navy, okay? So that's what you're looking at. But the main one is the CEF, okay? A little tip on that is, and when you go to the page where you're introduced to searching for personnel records of the First World War in Library and Archives Canada, is that whole page is full of a lot of great tips and information on how to search that database. Okay, here's some information on that page. Before you start, they'll tell you what to look up. If you have any paperwork from the person, and especially the First World War, that does give a regimental number, a service number. Okay, perhaps what battalion they start with. Search tips. Okay, one of the ones I use in this area is a battalion, the 98th Battalion, that was raised in Welland, starting in 1916. Okay, their block of service numbers start with usually 210 or 211. And they're 6-digit numbers. If you've got a page of grants and you're looking for everybody in the 98, I can put in their 210 asterisk, okay, under their regimental number, and that will filter all of the results. I do know that. My grandfather's battalion he was 198. So I believe their battalion numbers start about 191, or 6 numbers. Everyone with that serial number or regimental number around that belong to the 94th Battalion. About the records, the ones you've got on these links, okay, and they've got links to each one, are the Canadian Expeditionary Force, non-permanent active militia in Canada, Royal Newfies, Newfie Forestry Corps, CEF volunteers who were rejected at Valcartier for whatever reason, could be medical, could be that they were the wrong nationality, and Imperial War Service gratuity files, okay? Now, here's one, and you almost, if you really want to get into this, I almost have to run a little workshop on how to read a CEF service file. And there's one of the pages in, I'll say, of 90, or there could be more than 1 or 2 pages. It's like a big recipe card, okay? It'd be about almost 8 by 10, say, and you were to record a lot of information about your travels through the military. When you sign up and are taken into the military, you're pretty well passed hand to hand from unit to unit. And there's a certain prescribed formula they use that you would say join up in the 98th Battalion. And then when you disembarked in Liverpool, automatically you'd be taken out of the 98th Battalion and put into the 32nd Reserve Battalion. You'd be struck off strength from the 98th Battalion and TOS taken on strength into the 32nd Reserve Battalion. They need to keep track of you put you on a ration strength so you can actually get food, then send you on to where the battalion that you'll be fighting with out in the field in France. You know, almost need to run a little workshop on that, how you read a service file. And TOS, taken on strength, SOS, struck off strength, are two of the main terms, and you'll follow them from regiment to regiment through their career, okay? Even when you go to hospital, you'd be struck off strength from the battalion you're with in the field, say the 3rd Battalion, and then you'd be taken on strength at, say, a Chelsea Convalescent Hospital. They do give you tips on that, but there's some terms and such that reading a service file. You can access the records, and also on this page, there's related links to other records that are available for World War I or searching military records. Okay, now the non-digitized records, you actually have to go to Ottawa or hire someone to go to Ottawa in person and visit Library and Archives where they hold them, and you can order copies from the LAC. Okay. And it could be CEF volunteers that they may not have made it into digitization, some non-permanent active militia, imperial gratuities. Important notes about ordering copies. On the online order form, okay, you're looking title description, enter the record group name, okay, example, non-permanent active militia file. And under the reference, enter the name, regimental number, or rank. Oddly enough, for officers in World War I, they didn't have regimental numbers. They just went by their name and their rank, okay? And then you've got, like I say, a volume number where all this stuff is in their record rooms. For example, George Martin, his regimental number was 1384, and he's with record groups 9-11-B-7, volume 48 is where you're going to actually find his records physically. Okay. Related links. First World War, all other records loaded related to the First World War. One of them is circumstances of death. That's quite an interesting one that you can search. For instance, one of our Black soldiers, Lance Sergeant John Bright, won a military medal at Passchendaele. Okay, so you can look up his citation about medals, and also you can find out what killed John Bright. He died in September 2nd, 1918, on the way from Arras to Cambrai in the last 100 days of the war. It was very tragic. He joined up in Fort Erie in August of 1914, went overseas in late 1915, I believe, was wounded in June, spent over a year in the hospital, came back out, was promoted through the ranks up to Lance Sergeant, okay, and then was killed on September 2nd by artillery. He was very badly wounded by shrapnel. They've actually made a note of the circumstances of death of John Bright and many others. War diaries of the First World War. Every unit that's out, and even the ones in Afghanistan or wherever they are, they write up every day a war diary that it gives not only things like weather, temperature, or that, it also gives locations, if they're marching from where to where, conditions of what's going on there. Was there any fighting that day? Did they have any casualties? Did they take any prisoners if they were on a trench raid? Did they capture any of the enemy's guns or things like that? So your war diaries are, when they were being written, they were in fact secret because it did have actual locations. The locations were not as on your service record. You got a promotion from private to corporal in the field, or you joined your unit in the field in France. War diaries delineate exactly where you are, where you're going, how you're going to get there. They can be quite interesting. In the service record, especially for World War I, if you know the company they're in, whether it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or whatever, the war diary will talk about a company posted here and attacked along these lines. And if you get the maps from World War I, not only will they have the battalion itself, but they may give the exact route that one of the companies took. If you can find out what company your ancestor was in, You can follow them in France and Belgium. Very interesting. We've got one from the 2nd Field Regiment, Royal Canadian Artillery, held by the 10th Battery here in St. Catharines, all except for a few pages apparently that were blown up during the Second World War. We've digitized it and put it on our website. I've never searched personnel records for the nurses, but the next three, 1914-15 Star, British War Medal, and Victory Medal, so those are what we call medal rolls, what you're entitled to wear on your left side of your uniform. The 1914-15 Star, if you served in those first 2 years of the war, especially actively in the trenches, you got a star-shaped medal that you would wear to distinguish you from almost everyone else in the war period, because most people didn't get over there until maybe 1916. It showed that you were a real veteran because you'd been in there since 14, 15, some of the early big battles. And of course, like all of your World War I medals, they're all named. Those ones are actually named on the back because the back is flat. The British War Medal says that you served in the war and you were entitled to wearing that medal. You've served so many months or so many places in the war. And they're also named, those medals, and they're named on the edge. Like a coin, you turn it on edge, and there will be an inscription there giving your rank, your number, your name, the unit you served with, okay? And that would be called the British War Medal. And I think it's, the knight on it is it George slaying a German dragon? Of course, the Germans had to be dragons, right? And then we had the Allied Victory Medal. And I guess they would be one of the original rainbow because the ribbon for it is actually watered silk in a rainbow effect from edge to edge, okay? So that would be the Allied Victory Medal. So ours look a little bit different from the American, a little bit different from the French, but they all have the same theme and the same rainbow watered silk type ribbon to suspend it so you can hang it on your clothing. Interesting that they're also all named, but if you were part of what they call the Coolie Corps, which would be Asian laborers, largely Chinese, but not necessarily all Chinese, and the Coolie Corps did work. They did engineering work, constructing roads, constructing trenches, putting up barbed wire, all of railroads, working on railroads, both light and regular, all through. You got a war medal and a victory medal, but guess what? Their quality wasn't quite as good, okay? But they'd still be named. Very interesting that these medal rolls can tell you quite a bit. And we issued millions of them in the First World War, and they're all named. Very, very interesting. Tell you quite a bit of information on it. Okay. And many Canadians served with the British forces. Now, here's one that I've run into here. There's a chap from Thorold. In World War I, he joined the Royal Flying Corps, Canada. It was the Royal Flying Corps of the British Army that was set up at Beamsville. And I think he went through there. Then he went over to France with the Royal Flying Corps, later to be called the Royal Air Force. All their records are held in England, in the UK archives, although they're not free. I think it's £3. They have a unique way. You can call up the record, but it comes up as a scrambled checkerboard. You can see aspects of it, like part of the name. This one I looked up actually had Thorold in the record, so I knew I was looking at the right one, but I didn't spend the £3 to actually call it up and print it off. So another one is, like say, the Commonwealth Graves. We already touched on this, and they have 1.7 million records. And I just Google cwgc.org. Now, I've done it so often that I think my computer knows where I'm going, and it automatically takes me to that site. Under their Find Records heading, you can find the war dead, their archive, writing about their records, commemorations, and World War II records, and an FAQ. I mostly go through finding war. I don't know if I have, let's see. Okay, so here's one of the things, the top line in the search fields for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. So the first one you got to put in is last name of the casualty. And then if you have it, a first name or initials, And then right below that is the service number if you have it, and perhaps the regiment. I find some of these databases, the more information you put in, the more confused they get, and they'll give you zero results. So I just enter the last name of the casualty. As long as I don't get too many, I can go through each one. And of course, if they're Canadian, eliminate all the English ones from English regiments and such, and narrow it down quickly to find the proper person I'm looking for in their regimental or service number. If I have a first name, I can put that in too. They might be using their middle name as opposed to a first name. So oftentimes less is more. So when I put the last name in, if they were part of the local scene that joined up in Welland in 1916 with the 98th Battalion, I would put in a service number there, 210 star. Okay, under that name, it would look out everybody who has a 210 starting service number. It helps filter things. Regiments, I've never really searched for that. I mostly use the last name and whatever I can maybe put together for a first name, etc. Okay, so here we go. Now, they're in Wikipedia. One of the very interesting things they've got is they've got lists of all the infantry battalions and actually the Canadian forces who made up the CEF or Canadian Expeditionary Force in World War I. We actually authorized 260 infantry battalions. Now, a battalion is roughly 800 men if it's up to strength. They actually served in a separate part of the Army called the Canadian Expeditionary Force. They weren't militia. They weren't necessarily regular forces like the Royal Canadian Dragoons or the Royal Canadian Regiment. They were special numbered battalions that served only in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Of the 260, only 53 of these battalions ever reached the front line. And if you're looking on the list of infantry battalions, the ones that served on the front line, their numbers and such are listed in bold. The other 210 are listed as their number and maybe where they're from. But the ones that served actually in the front line are listed in bold. Now, I'll give you an example of that. The people from here who joined up in the 98th Battalion, okay, they actually went into the 3rd Battalion, 1st Division. And their identifying marks are a rectangular red patch on their sleeve with a green triangle on top of that. And that says they were 1st Division, 3rd Battalion. So most of the people from the 98th, as soon as they landed in England, that battalion was broken up and was put into a reserve, and then they were fed forward, and they tried to keep them into some type of regional, like the 2nd Battalion was Eastern Ontario, 3rd Battalion was the Toronto Regiment. People from this area, they tried to keep them serving in Southern Ontario regiments, even though their original battalion was broken up. Just a wee bit of background on why we had infantry battalions. When the First World War, there was such an influx that training 30,000 men locally in the local militia was really not practical. Most of the militia units prior to World War I were simply social gatherings, okay? The officers could be of good, bad, indifferent quality. They wouldn't have much in the way of infrastructure. Before this building here, this armory was built, they most likely had a tar paper drill shed to work from. They wouldn't do much in the way of real military training other than maybe just marching around a bit. So they actually, instead of working with the local regiments of militia, Sam Hughes, in his infinite wisdom, established the camp at Valcartier. They were looking for something like 15 to 18,000 volunteers. They got like 30,000 in the first rush. So it worked out well to send them to Valcartier and start training them en masse and sending them over as the first contingent, the second contingent, etc., and putting them in numbered infantry battalions. Okay. There were also not only infantry, you had Canadian mounted rifles, say from British Columbia, mounted rifles battalions, and they would be mounted infantry who would travel on horses and fight on foot. Okay. Once they found out that the cavalry made much too big a target for machine guns. They were mostly broken up or put into infantry battalion and served in the Canadian Corps with the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Okay. You also had Canadian Cavalry Brigade, artillery. The 10th Battery from St. Catharines went overseas, originally numbered the 7th Battery. In December of 14, they were renamed the 10th Battery. Machine Gun Corps, Canadian Automobile Machine Gun Brigade, tank battalions, service corps, field artillery, garrison artillery. There's quite a bit of information here on Wikipedia about infantry battalions. And then not only that, but what is considered where they were from, when they were formed, but who perpetuates their memory and their battle honors. The Lincoln and Welland has 3 or 4 that they actually perpetuate. I believe the 81st, 98th, and the 176th Niagara Rangers. Their legacies and war record and war achievements are perpetuated by the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. Okay, let's go. Here's just a little example of the listing from that you can find under Wikipedia. The 1st Battalion Canadian Mounted Rifles, authorized in November of 1914, disbanded 15th of November 1920. They are perpetuated by the, what is it? I can't quite see. Is it North Saskatchewan Regiment? Okay, and another medium battery of artillery. Same with the 2nd Battalion Canadian Mounted Rifles. They're actually perpetuated to this day by the British Columbia Dragoons. Okay, next thing. Okay, Ancestry.ca. They have a lot of information from World War I, but a lot of the information they have from World War I is primarily what's available through library and archives, say the free stuff. But they have something unique from World War II. This is my go-to for people who were fatalities in World War II. Their records are unrestricted personnel files, okay? So if you click on this one here, and you really do have to have an Ancestry account. Like I say, the museum has a free account, okay? And I've looked up more than a few people with the, mostly by name, okay? One of the recent ones I did was some information on a Canadian from Virgil. His name was Cope, K-O-O-P, okay? And he was an aircraftsman who went missing in Burma in June of 1945. They actually, in the jungle, vicious weather they had there, they actually flew their plane into a hill, okay? And the story that came out afterwards was, sometime, I guess in the 80s, a wristwatch was found in the jungle on the surface in Burma by a Burmese hunter. They started doing some excavating, and we sent a military expedition over there to excavate the site. And we found the remains of the crew of that Dakota that crashed into a hillside in Burma in June 1945. And now they're buried in the Singapore Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery. For the family, I looked up, and under RCAF especially, they'll put photos at the start of their file, and these photos were used on their identity cards, okay? Army files and such, very seldom. Navy files, do you find pictures? But with the RCAF, almost invariably, you find pictures of the deceased service person. That's your major online World War II. Because people are still alive, because they haven't been dead for more than 20 years, the only sure way of keeping the files is if you were killed between 1939 and 1947. It's a free database, and you can look it up, and there's all kinds of information in there. One family, I looked up something for them, and there's an official death record to Ontario, and they thought he had been killed in a training accident or a work accident working around planes and machine guns, but apparently it was actually a suicide. He was out in British Columbia, and he committed suicide, and that's what's listed on the Ontario file for deaths, right? Going to the registry. If those records are unrestricted because those people are all dead and have been dead since 1947 at least, the restricted ones, you have to submit a request. The best way to do it is online. Remembering those tips, you try and find out as much information as possible that you can put on the form that you're going to submit. Ideally, if you can find a discharge certificate that has their regimental or service number on it, that's really ideal. But anything more you can give them works. Don't expect a quick result. 6 months, maybe a year. You might have to phone them and remind them that you sent it in. Everything from World War II, where you came back alive, Korean War, and all files post-war, World War II for the Canadian Forces, are restricted access, okay? Which means that you have to be the veteran if you're still alive, or perhaps a wife, okay, looking for records, maybe for pension purposes or disability or something purposes, okay? They're available, but there are restricted and there are rules, okay? And if the veteran is still alive, only the veteran can apply for them. Or if you've been deceased less than 20 years as a veteran, then supposedly only the family can submit a request, okay? Now, I think they're fairly loosey-goosey about family. It could be a grandson, granddaughter, cousin, things like that. If you've been deceased less than 20 years, if you've been gone more than 20 years, your file is open and anybody can submit a request for a military service file. But I suggest you do it online. Other places that you can find information is the Central Ontario branch of the Western Front Association, okay? They're dealing with World War I for the most part, okay? And they have a lot of different information, stories, research that they do. They have a research group. Perhaps if you find out that one of your relatives was in A Company, 3rd Battalion, they may be able to help you look through war diaries to find out where they were at the Battle of Amiens, August 8th, 1918, when we attacked the German forces, and it became the Black Day of the German Army as they collapsed. Another interesting place to find stuff is the London Gazette. Now, that's like the Canadian Gazette, the official newspaper, where all kinds of things get published. And there'll be some things like John Grant and James Bright both got military medals at Passchendaele. Not only would they be awarded those medals, but it would be published in the Gazette. They did win those medals, and I think when they won it sometimes, and if it's a high value medal like a Victoria Cross, they might even publish the citation, okay? So that's your proof that a medal for gallantry or devotion to duty was issued, and it'd be put in the London Gazette, like all parliamentary stuff, and that their acts and such. And that's a good place to look, especially if you're looking for something maybe like a distinguished conduct medal and you're looking for the citation. Another very interesting thing to look at are embarkation lists, okay? And I stumble on this, and it's militaryandfamilyhistory.blog. And the interesting thing about this is they have a huge number of nominal roles. A nominal role is a listing, okay, of all the officers, NCO, and men who served in a particular unit at a specific point in time. They were often compiled prior to embarking for England, sometimes including embarkation information, ship's name, embarkation port, date of sailing, okay? Nominal role usually lists the soldier's name, rank, former corps that maybe they came from. They might have served with the militia here or in Canada before joining up with the 98th, okay? And interestingly, name of next of kin, address of next of kin, country of birth, place and date where they were TOS or taken on strength. The Navy, and in fact, if you've been on cruise ships or even ferries, they generally like to make sure that who got on got off, okay? So these nominal roles, if your ship was torpedoed and a lot of people were lost, this nominal role and all the information would be used to notify next of kin, the circumstances and such about your death on the ocean. But they're pretty exact on these, that who gets on the ship gets off the ship, and they didn't lose anybody in between. Quite interesting. This military and family history has hundreds of nominal rolls for every CEF battalion, for the infantry, for the construction battalions. They're all on their website, and they're just a wealth of information. When I was looking through for the segregated battalion of Black Canadians for number 2 construction, you can see that there were quite a few Americans that had come across the border to serve with, as they said in those terms, the colored man's battalion, the segregated number 2 construction battalion. But it's very interesting to see all the Americans that came across to serve with that Black Canadian unit in World War I. So again, they got all kinds of nominal roles. Okay. Here's another one here. The top, they're casualties by name and by date. I found a website, and stupid me, I did not bookmark it or take a special note of it because I can never find it again. It actually goes through World War I mostly, and World War II casualties day by day. And part of it this one is from the Canadian Virtual War Memorial. And this chap here is related to someone from the Falls. His name is Berkeley Mitchell. So he's on the Canadian Virtual War Memorial with his details from the Commonwealth Graves Commission. Okay, they have that entry from there, where he's buried, where exactly he's buried in the cemetery, details of the cemetery, stuff like that. But what they also have in the War Memorial are they have 4 other things, and I put 2 of them here. One is a little newspaper clipping about him and his new bride, where they're from, where she's living, okay, his background and all that. And then, oddly enough, we've got a nice picture. Again, if you search through the fatalities for the Army, you're not going to find a picture of Berkeley Mitchell in there. Okay. The other pictures they've got with this are where he's killed, and he was killed on the Dutch-Belgian border, a place called Putte, P-U-T-T-E, when Canadian forces were going to drive the Germans away from the shores of the Scheldt estuary so cargo ships could get to Antwerp, okay, and unload in the port of Antwerp. They also have a picture of his grave at Bergen op Zoom, okay, because he was exhumed from his temporary grave in the field, in the forest not too far from Putte, and then placed into a permanent grave in the Canadian War Cemetery in Bergen op Zoom in Holland. And that there has his temporary cross made out of wood, but it has all his information on it. And over time, they were all replaced with stone headstones that have all the common features of the Commonwealth graves. They're around the world, the headstones are all the same. Officers are buried beside privates. No headstone stands out from any other. They all have the same value. Okay. So this is Berkeley Mitchell. And we have a little display on Berkeley here. The one thing is he was 32 when he was an old man for that time when he got married at 32. And we have a picture of him and his wife standing outside the church. They never had any children, okay? So really all she got was a memorial cross and some of his service medals from serving overseas. Am I finished? Maybe I am. Yes, I'm finished now. How was that, Amanda? Got any questions?
That was fantastic. Cheryl Bowman pointed out that there are UK civilian casualties on the CWGC site as well.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Okay.
And Cheryl is one of our research people, and she definitely knows her stuff. Thanks, Cheryl. Brian says the CVWM is a great resource. He has a similar clipping of his 2C1R John Carty grave from St. Catharines. He and his brother Alexander both died in World War II. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I know I have my own relatives. Can you tell us about the petition?
Sure. Our lease is up in April of 2006. We have a 5-year lease, more or less a standard, but it had to be renewed every 5 years. Right now, the city is looking at all their core and non-core assets. It's a provincial mandate. So they're looking at core assets, and those would be roads, utilities, such as sewer, water, and all that. They have to fund those and keep those up as a municipality. That's a no-brainer, okay?
Yeah.
Virtually everything else is a non-core asset. City Hall is a non-core asset. or any of their buildings, their work centers, all are non-core. They're going to decide, oh, we're going to keep the city hall because we need a place for the mayor to hang out when he's not doing anything. But this is a city property, was purchased for $2 from the Department of National Defense. And they looked at this, and the staff recommendation was they wanted to declare this surplus to reposition or repurpose the building. The staff recommended that we get a 1-year extension on our lease so we could actually find somewhere else to go. Basically, for us, that just can't happen. We have this building here barely contains, at 18,000 square feet, barely contains what we have, overflowing on a lot. So simply trying to find somewhere to go, like a small building in a strip mall or whatever, we'd just be finished. We'd be gone, okay? And repositioning this thing, surplusing it, if you've ever been in the building, it has no handicap access because if you were in the building, you were able-bodied. If you were handicapped, you weren't in the building. One of these days, we have to put an elevator on. And also, it's a mini fortress. Okay, it is here to guard the frontier from those characters on the other side of the river. It's meant to be defended. All of the interior walls are 3 bricks thick. The bottom windows are set up for machine guns. They can put machine guns out the bottom windows. It's a mini fortress. They got huge bars on all the windows. Repurposing this place is monumental and extraordinarily expensive. And there is a heritage designation on it, but we do all know that really doesn't protect much. It certainly doesn't protect the interior of the building. It protects more or less the outside facade as a heritage building. We put our petition together. I've got a lot of names online, and the city council, the city staff was following how many thousand names we got, okay? Michael Booth with the Lundy's Lane Historical Society really stepped up and was a leader of our steering committee of all the groups that are in the building and collected thousands of personal signatures at events like the Last Chance Car Show, him and Patrick Sirianni, okay? We collected up physical signatures, we collected up online signatures for our petition, and then we sat down with some of the councillors, we lobbied the councillors, and I have to say there were a couple of that really stepped up. Mona Patel, a councillor from the city of Niagara Falls, and Lori Lococo really did her homework. She came out, she visited us when we had an open house and book sale to gather signatures and support and put our story out. That next Wednesday, she came in to visit our cadet corps, and they were having a parents meeting, and she got to talk with a lot of parents and became very firmly convinced that with the pipe band that does a youth thing, with the cadet corps who does the extensive, very valuable youth program, that this building and our Niagara Military Museum and the groups that are in it, it has a valuable place in our community. When it came to the meeting on the 28th, we had all our speakers lined up. We waited 2.5 hours to get up to council. And before we got to say very much at all, or mostly me, one of the councillors, Victor Pietrangelo, stood up and put forward a motion to take this building off the surplus list. And it worked out that we got unanimous support from the council, a resolution that not only will this building not be on the surplus list, but our steering committee will be meeting with city staff. We're getting as long a lease as we can to keep the building going and continue as a community hub with 10 different user groups in the building. We really do need to put an elevator on.
Yes.
So that expands exponentially the uses for the building. We'll be working out details of how we can go forward with a longer term lease on this building and maintain the Niagara Military Museum.
That's wonderful news. That's a great resource. If you haven't, I encourage you to go. I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Jim, for joining us for our November meeting. We do try in November to have something military related for Remembrance Day, and this was perfect. I certainly learned a few things, and I'm a huge fan of military records because they're so comprehensive.
Amazing. They were all done by hand.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, World War I, it's astonishing the amount of paperwork they had on all these people. I'm gobsmacked, as they would say. To finish up, we're open normally Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Send us an email niamilmuseum@gmail.com, or we can be by appointment or by group. If your people want to put a group together, they send an email. We can take them through on a private tour of the whole building. We'd be pleased to do that. Just to blow our horn a bit, our Black Military History of Niagara was an exhibit at the Canadian War Museum for about 2.5 years, during COVID, of course. Right now, there is a national Black military history exhibit on national tour called Communities at War. And it's our exhibit, the adaptation, plus material from Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, and the West Coast. And apparently at the moment, it is in Guelph.
Oh.
Because that was a stop on the Underground Railroad.
Oh.
Yeah, Southwest Ontario was full of stops on the Underground Railroad.
I did know that, but I didn't know Guelph specifically. That's very interesting.
Yeah, as was Niagara Falls, as was St. Catharines, as was London, Fort Erie for sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a national tour. And that was developed by us working with Wilma Morrison and Donna Ford.
Where is it in Guelph?
I don't know. I have to get in touch with them and with the new director of exhibits and get some more information and maybe an itinerary as to where it's going. I'm hoping we can get it here to Niagara Falls, but you never know.
That'd be fantastic. If you find out where it is, pass the information along and I will pass it along in our next newsletter and let people know that they can visit there as well.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And for everybody online, if you missed anything during this webinar, as you may know, if you've been here before, we'll be online on YouTube shortly. Thanks again, Jim, and good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay. Good night.
Have a wonderful evening.
Okay.